if you're reliant only on the rational aspects that are driving a category, and again, cross category, and you can quibble with me about the precise percentage, but do you really want to market with information that's only giving you 20% of why someone's doing something?
2 days ago, BrandKeys released the 27th annual BrandKeys Customer Loyalty Engagement Index, the CLEI. First thing I wanted to kind of note about that is it's the 27th year for that. Interestingly, as you're going to hear in just a few minutes, there were a lot of changes to the impact loyalty has on brand affinity and ultimately sales. Here to explain what that means is Robert Pasikoff, who is founder and CEO of BrandKeys, the author of this research. Robert, thanks for joining me. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much.
So let's look at this. We have a unique opportunity to unpack this with the person who's responsible for all this. So I'm going to just set this up because I've seen some of the data and some of the highlights. But I think if you can illuminate what's really behind this, that's going to be a big deal. So a couple of things, and I'm just going to read right here. Brands which will dominate the categories in 2025 and reveal dramatic differences in how loyalty operates as the most accurate predictor of consumer purchasing behavior, sales, brand market share, and profits. That's a lot of stuff packed into brand loyalty.
Yes, but it's I don't know if this is a phrase, it's an axiomatic chain of events that takes place. You know, one of the reasons why we're so demanding about what marketing does for a brand or, or a product or a service. If you can engage someone, which means emotionally engaging them, not just getting their attention, and you can get them to be loyal to you, at 21st century loyalty, I always point out it's the era of I only drink Coke, I will never drink Pepsi, I'm leaving the restaurant if you don't have my Coke, doesn't exist anymore. There are, as we will see, hierarchies in terms of categories and loyalties that people hold. And if you can find a 1963 Coke Pepsi paradigm for yourself, then jump on it and make it your own. But that really doesn't exist anymore. What it is I'm going to be engaged and I'm going to be generally loyal to someone. And the minute that you have that loyalty, you have positive behavior, which equates to sales, egregious financial mismanagement on the part of the brand, the corporation notwithstanding, you really ought to make money. And so what we've seen more and more is that when we're essentially looking in 95% of the categories that we track at national brands. It tends to reflect their ownership of a category. I mean, their share in a category. And as you and I have talked about in the past, it's not 100% correlation because the engagement process itself is really more emotional than it is rational. And so,
but as you've pointed out a bunch of times in the past as well, it may not be 100% correlation, but it's still really, really strong.
Oh, we're absolutely amazed at the numbers that we see. I mean, if we look again, you're looking cross category and product and services, the correlation between the high degrees of loyalty and what we see as market share or market ownership is probably 0.8087 plus. I mean, that's extraordinarily high. It happens to be one of the reasons that we decided this year to look at, the top three in a category, to call them, a gold, a silver, and a bronze, because they're able to associate that with rankings. And, what we see is that, yeah, it's not perfect, but if you look at the top three, you kind of go, yeah, these are the top three in a category.
Right. You can suss that out. I'm interested longitudinally. 27 years is a pretty good view of brand loyalty. And as you said, it's not, we don't have, and it doesn't exist really in the marketplace, the Coke Pepsi affinities that used to before my day, frankly, but they're not there really in general. But can you put numbers to, is this even possible? Put numbers to the differences in how brand loyalties have changed and the meaning of that, the power of that over the years.
Yes. Before I do that, if I may, I'd want to point out that you're also seeing a dramatic change in terms of how marketing has developed. Um, if you go back to, I guess they always say, modern marketing was really happened in the late 40s and early 50s of last century. Um, you really probably wouldn't do very badly if you just based all of your attention on the four P's, the
Right.
product, place, promotion, and price. As the marketing world changed and as consumers changed, things became more emotionally dependent rather than rationally dependent.
Right.
And we call it out now. It's probably 80% emotional and 20% rational.
Across the board, if you had to just kind of lay that
Yeah,
across.
and there, I mean, partly the reality. I mean, you don't really need to be an experienced researcher to understand that there are two key things. One is if all you're doing is selling on price, terrific, but then you're a commodity. I mean, that works for that. The other side of it is if you're reliant only on the rational aspects that are driving a category, and again, cross category, and you can quibble with me about the precise percentage, but do you really want to market with information that's only giving you 20% of why someone's doing something?
Right. Not only that, but you're at risk with your competitors kind of going, wait a second, there's another 80% of the factors here that I can play with that these guys are.
Right. And so from an economic perspective, I mean, we did this in the late 90s. We extracted all of the buying behavior numbers and we came up with things and it was about what did it cost you as a brand to get a customer? I mean, it was one of the arguments actually coming out of an old paradigm of satisfaction. Why wouldn't you want to keep someone happy and satisfied? Rather, because the history the history unfortunately shows that a lot of brands went, yeah, what the hell, we don't care. We'll just get someone else to take your place as a customer. Um, and we look at it now, and depending on the category, it will be anything from it costs 15 to 22 times more to recruit a new customer than it does to keep keep one you already have. Um, and that's up about 20% from
So
late
this
90s.
those statistics have been around for years. Nobody ever really knows who authored those statistics. And I've had conversations with some really intelligent people in market research that go, listen, it's the statistic everybody has and knows. So I don't even know where it came from, but there it is. But what you're saying is, and I think it was a percentage difference or a small multiple difference. What you're saying is it now costs 15x to 22x multiples of to recruit a new customer than to keep an existing one. That has to get somebody's attention. Marketers have to finally be paying
Well,
attention to that.
They and interestingly enough, where they are able to, I want to say, kind of put a dollar figure on it, they do. Because I would bet that you have more than once in your life received some sort of postcard or email, mailing that says, hey, if you come over and open up your bank account here at XYZ Bank, we'll put $750 into your account, into your checking. Now, they ain't doing that out of the goodness of their heart. What they've done is they've done a calculation that says when we do all our marketing, I mean, this is, of course, is looking at everything that they're doing. I mean, it's to get to Mike GM Batista. What do I need to do in terms of my newspaper, my radio, my online, my social, my TV advertising? What did that come down to? And the answer is it's probably closer on a bank basis. This having some experience in this category on the brand side years ago, it probably costs them from a marketing perspective about $12,000.
To acquire me as a customer. It's the best I've felt about myself in a long time.
There you go. Yeah, that's what you're worth to them. Although not to burst your bubble, but they're only willing to give you $750.
Right, I know. But there's some negotiating room in there.
Right,
This deal's not done yet.
right. So yeah, I mean, this is the stuff that we looked at back in the 90s, and we said, okay, what would this, what would happen? What would happen when you invested in a customer rather than trying to acquire a new customer? I mean, there were the three aspects, which was and you hear people talk about it all the time, and most of the time brands don't have the numbers. I mean, it was always what would a 5% increase in loyalty result in terms of lifetime loyalty costs. And we've seen that too. I mean, we now I will say that is still high. It's still in the high 80s, but it's down 9%. It's down 9% from the initial valuations that we took, but
it's still in the high 80s. So in essence,
and
who
you
cares that
weren't
it's down?
and you weren't faced with digital, you weren't faced with online, you didn't have the kind of brand diversification that we've seen over the past 20 years. I mean, that's why I say you need to take marketing techniques, marketing approaches, marketing strategies into account, and look at what's changed, over the past 30 years.
Well, if I'm reading this right, that the proliferation of the brands, the explosion in competition, the huge diversity in channels and the messaging out there, everything's proliferated to such an extent. And since 1997, that number's only down 9%.
Right.
That's a big deal. That to me means that these measures hold true longitudinally, like almost no other brand measure does. The 2025 Global Exie Awards are now open for entries. The Exies are the first and only awards program dedicated to highlighting the innovative approaches to customer experience, CX, employee experience, EX, user experience, UX, UI, experience design, and experience architecture across verticals, retail experience, travel experience, healthcare experience, and more. We're working with a growing list of sponsors and partners around the world to honor the breakthrough approaches to creating experiences that drive results. The confluence of technologies and the convergence of business necessities are driving some of the most creative experiences ever, and we think it's time to give credit where credit is due. The 2025 Global Exy Awards are now open for entries, and early bird pricing ends soon. To learn more, go to exyawards.com, that's EXXY awards.com, or visit customerland.net and click on the Exy banner.
Yeah, we see this all the time. I mean, again, the last one that we looked at was what happens if you increase loyalty in terms of what effect does it have to your costs in terms of cost reductions and so forth. And we see that that's equivalent to almost a 30% cost reduction if you can get a 2% increase in terms of loyalty. And let me just be clear, it isn't so much, and I need more people. It could be more people, but it could just be 2% more option of you doing something that benefits my brand.
Right.
Our rule of six about 6 times more likely to pay attention, times more likely to buy you, 6 times more likely to recommend you, 6 times more likely to buy your stock if you're publicly traded, the 6 times more likely to give you the benefit of the doubt in, when things go, upside down, and not walk away and just say, okay, fine, I can go buy something else.
Right.
I mean, that's where you're seeing the biggest effects. And we would always think that, if you were a COO or a CMO, this is what you're interested in. I mean,
that's actually another rich conversation we should have, because anecdotally, so many of the conversations I'm having with CMOs lately and people of that orientation and level, so much of what they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis is coming from the CFO. And CMOs who many of whom are not naturally predisposed to looking over spreadsheets and financial charts are being forced to consider the hard financial realities of the stuff they're putting out there. Having said all that, that's another 10 conversations away. And one thing I think we should do for the people who are listening to this is at least hit the high level of a couple of categories, just so you can see what's in this. And then I do want to say, and you'll see a link to this below the actual podcast, you can find the actual report and the highlights of it at brandkeys.com. Look for the link that says the 27th annual BrandKeys Customer Loyalty Engagement Index. Within that, there are 3 categories. I think it would be, and there's many categories, I've seen this, but 3 top level categories are worth talking about. And you said earlier, you've got them broken down into gold, silver, and bronze. Good. Right. Simple minds like mine can get that. In automobile, gold is Hyundai, silver is Ford, bronze is Toyota. Tell us what that means and what it doesn't mean.
It means that from a perspective regarding the brand, that given the kinds of expectations that people have for their ideal in the category, in this case, automotive, that Hyundai does better at meeting those expectations than Ford, who does better than Toyota. And my guess is that, well, I said before, is that it is reflective of how people are going to behave. So not a perfect correlation. We're talking human beings and what available share numbers. So I think that is very, very close to reflecting what the share of market is. I will say, I mean, I say this in all candor. Years ago, when the economy was imploding and no one was doing anything, we did some work for Toyota, and we did not write the advertising. I wish I could claim this in this instance. I did, but I did not. But we identified a value, an emotional value for them that has become the tentpole for all of their work. And if you remember, we came in and said, you know, people are worried about they've lost their money, the banks are folding, the homes are going, but they need their cars to go to work. And Hyundai, they took that, and I don't know, literally a week later, they came out with the bring the car. Don't worry about it. It was their buyback program that they instituted. And that turned them around. I mean, they would had saw a 14% increase in sales in an industry that had seen a 37% drop in sales.
And that's still, that idea still plays strong in all their brand messaging and attributes. Now it's not so much a buyback problem, but they have a 100,000 mile plus, I think, warranty, which is the strongest in the industry. And I'll tell you again, anecdotally, I know people who have bought that brand. That's one of the biggest reasons they bought it.
And you know, because the rational stuff the rational stuff is kind of a given. You know, it's the car, it's the handles are not falling off the doors, the car runs, you know, the MPG, you know, there are equal levels within any of the major brands that we're looking at. You know, even from a price perspective, you're not talking about the difference between buying a Hyundai and buying a Rolls Royce. I mean,
Right.
you know,
Right.
a Ford and a Toyota are going to run about the same. Distribution is about the same. Um, and ultimately, I think, you know, you can slice and dice. This is one of my little bet noirs. I mean, you can slice and dice satisfaction to your heart's content and talk to me about you know, the car that has three doors and one windshield wiper and has the highest satisfaction rating known to mankind versus the four-door car that has one, you know, one uh, windshield wiper. I mean, the the rational stuff is really price of entry these days. And
I
yeah,
wouldn't call it table stakes, but it almost is.
I
And
don't,
anybody who sells cars knows that. I mean,
yeah,
it just is that way. Let's move over to cable news.
okay.
This gets a little more interesting. And just a quick disclaimer, none of this is political. This is data we're talking.
No,
So
no. I mean,
that was a preemptive just
well,
so it doesn't go there.
you
So,
know,
but let
w-
me just let's talk rankings, and then I'll let you explain that because I think that's it's going to be fun to talk through.
uh,
Um, Gold, Fox,
yep.
silver, CNN, bronze, MSNBC. Go ahead.
Um, well, again, it comes down to what does one expect? You know, you have to understand it isn't political because you're actually looking at balanced samples. I mean, it'd be one thing if we said, okay, let's just talk about, you know, with folks who have right wing philosophies. We're not doing that. This is an issue of these are people who watch these channels three or more times a week. And now what you're seeing is someone is telling you among the Fox audience, well, what you're presenting, the content actually isn't the issue. What you're presenting fulfills my expectations and my desires better than a group of folks who are watching some other network. And this one, actually, I'm glad you brought this one up because I think there was a story on the news just late last week that was talking about how MSNBC has lost 57% of its viewership.
Yep.
And yes, there are probably explanations regarding,
And more recently than that, their director of news along with it.
yeah, Rashida Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah, she left. And CNN, who had, I don't, I'm sure was never number one, although just in all candor, they called me up once to yell at me about the fact that they were not number one. Um, had not been, probably would have always had been a perennial number three when we were looking at this over the years. They certainly were not number two last year, and they've moved up. And again, from a behavioral basis about the loyalty metrics, you can at least see a correlation between how these rank and viewership numbers. I mean, even
Right.
anecdotally, because I don't have access to any of these, any of the detailed data from these.
No, but it's not hard to see. That's not a tough leap to make. That's pretty easy. So there are how many categories in total that you reviewed this
We,
year?
we did 104. We end up posting about 100 of them. We have some categories that don't want to just prefer not to give out the information, so we're okay about that. But yeah, there are about 100, and there I will say that there are a handful of categories where, because this is research, not opinion. There are a couple ties in terms of loyalty evaluations at the third level in terms of the hierarchy. But when you look at a large category, for example, like apparel retail or online retail, um, yeah, again, I don't, if someone turns around and goes, "Wow, Amazon was number one, you really surprised me." I mean, the answer is no. Okay, it's not a surprise, but
But it wouldn't be for that.
well, it
If it
wouldn't
was a
be
surprise, that would be surprising in itself.
in the real world, it's not a surprise. It's just that these data are showing you why. I mean, it's showing you ahead of time. And I will say we say these are these are predictive because we see changes in how people look at the various categories 12 to 18 months ahead of showing up on a brand tracker or someone saying something in a focus group, articulating something in a focus group. I mean, sometimes we're able to absolutely understand. I will say we've had clients who have turned on a dime on the basis of, wow, we need to address this. This has changed. We need to address this now.
I'll just say because I've seen past reports and I've seen the data breakdown from past reports. I've not seen them for this year. That what this becomes really fascinating and I think really instructive when you get to see the drivers and the percent contribution they each make in relation to the ideal in that category. And the fluctuations between the brands and the fluctuations year to year, how people, consumers, are viewing the things that go into their expectations for brand. Like watching that change year to year is is I think again, just really interesting. But as a brand, somebody who's got a view to what's happening in their category landscape, it's critical. Having said that, this full report and the highlights of it are available on BrandKeys website. It's brandkeys.com. You can find it there. Thanks again to Robert Pasikoff, who is founder and CEO of BrandKeys, for bringing the wisdom today. And look forward to doing this again.
Thank you, sir.